Well, good afternoon, everyone, or on West Coast time, good morning. My name is Larry Becker, and I want to welcome you. I'll be speaking in just a minute about 9 plus 9, 18 e-commerce trends and best practices to act on right now. And this session is presented by our sponsor, Square. And to kick things off, we actually have a short story from our sponsor, Square, about another organization that had to make the pivot to online sales. Let's watch.
We have managed to go 99 years of business without being online. Perhaps this was just the pressure that we needed to push us to be online. We were comfortable with business as usual, though we needed to be online years ago. And now here we are in the midst of another recession, in the midst of a pandemic. We are now online. We applied the pressure right back. That is important for business leaders and entrepreneurs to know, is to not panic. You are called as an entrepreneur to not panic. I know it's not easy, but you have to now be a leader. You cannot panic. While everybody else is panicking around you, your staff might be panicking. It is important as an entrepreneur to stay calm in the midst of a storm. That is what we're doing at Hot Sales. So we are faithful, we are hopeful, and we are trusting that we will be better after this. We will be stronger after this.
Well, all right, great to see that short presentation from Square. And if you give me just a second, folks, we are going to begin. Well, great. I hope you can all see my screen. So as mentioned, we're going to be speaking this afternoon about 18 e-commerce trends and best practices, 9 of each. And let's go ahead and jump in and get started. What we're going to cover, here's our brief agenda, is I'm going to first share 3 thoughts about the current moment, and I mean right now. We'll then look at these trends. These are trends that I recommend that all retailers and retail brands tune into. Some are going to be super relevant to you and you're going to want to act on them. And some you're just going to want to remain aware of as things continue to develop in the space. And from there, we're going to pivot to 9 best practices that, in my experiences, are really important to start working on today if they're not already something that you have in play or perhaps even have mastered. Why is there a green kayak on the screen? I hope you consider it more than tokenism towards the audience I'm addressing of outdoor retailer brands and aficionados. I thought I'd use a green arrow to highlight best practices whenever they come up, but then I thought, why not a green kayak? So you will be seeing that, I would reckon, about 18 times today. So I'm just going to share a brief bit about my own bio, just so you know who is in fact speaking. I have been in the online space for about 20 years. I currently work as a website and marketing consultant, working with brands ranging from around $10, $20 million revenue up into some billion-dollar retail publishers. I started out in the retail space on the in-house side. I worked with a national retail brand, Crutchfield, leader in consumer electronics, where I was the first VP of e-commerce. Worked in a digital agency environment, a company called RKG, one of the leaders in digital advertising and paid search marketing, since acquired by a firm called Merkle. And I've served as the Senior Director of Digital Marketing at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. So that's my background, and those are the experiences that I bring to sharing my observation about these trends and best practices that I hope you will find useful. So where are we right now as a retail community? I think, for the last 4 months, Mike Tyson has become sort of an inadvertent guru of retail forecasting. And what he said about his experience is really relative to the industry as a whole. So perhaps we have gotten punched in the mouth, but we are certainly standing up. My experience with retailers is that this is an industry of tremendous heart and resilience. And what's really happened right now in the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 environment, that this is a moment of tremendous opportunity, really, because it really levels the playing field. Maybe you're someone who already has a significant online retail digital business. Maybe you're someone who is making, as the Square video alluded to, that necessary pivot into online retail. Either way, we are all learning and relearning. And more than ever, the fundamentals matter. And that's something that we're going to spend time looking at, especially as we hit the best practices part of the presentation. The last thought I'll share with you is from the writer William Gibson. Some of you may know him as the author of various science fiction books, some of which have been made into movies like Blade Runner. And in an interview with The Economist in 2003, William Gibson said, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And I would say that applies very much to where we are at this moment. And I would expect the very heterogeneous nature of this audience. The future of online retail is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So especially as we look at some of these trends, you will see, oh, well maybe that, area one is an area where your company already has mastery. Others, could be on the distant horizon for you. And that's very typical of how the online retail space, broad as it is, and even within outdoor retail category, how things work out. So keep in mind that we're in this kind of lumpy topography as we move forward. So let's first take a look at the first trend that I'd say is affecting the industry right now, and that is the decreased importance, especially in the last 4 months, of bricks and mortar. What we're looking at here, and I know this graph is an eyeful, it is from a survey resulting in projections that eMarketer put out just in the last 10 days. So this is pretty fresh information. And they revised their projections quarterly. Many of you may have seen this. U.S. retail sales expected to decline 10.5%, bricks and mortar really pulling that decline down, 14% projected decline by the end of the year. The bright side is e-commerce is expected to rise net 18%, of course, across all categories by the end of the year. And what's really interesting is, according to this source, about 64% of that increase comes from, the shift to a bricks and clicks mentality, of a click to collect. And you can see from this other source that Adobe Digital Economy Index, which is a nice report that comes out quarterly, about 20%, 23% prefer using pickup in-store or curbside over delivery. So that's something to keep in mind as you're looking at your own retail footprint and what the relationship is going to be between online. So the green kayak takeaway here is that the successful retailers are going to be able to quickly pivot and strengthen that digital experience and its relationship to their existing stores. And again, this is something that has been in play literally for years, and many have already made that leap and mastered it. Others are probably feeling that squeeze more acutely than ever right now. The second trend to be aware of, we'll talk about in just a moment, but just lingering in that previous slide of this notion of really e-commerce is supposed to go up 18%, and we're going to see this significant decrease in bricks and mortar. So now more than ever, your site is your brand. And we no longer have that I hate to use the word crutch, but the opportunity to rely on all the great things that our bricks and mortar presence may have done. Perhaps there's a way to integrate it, but no matter what claims we make, the experience that the customer has on your site as they attempt to find you online, to navigate the site, to check out, and then the experience they have post-purchase, all of that amounts to your brand. So as you wonder, how do you begin to invest in that? One of the rubrics to keep in mind is that you really need to have a simple bifurcated view, that we're going to put our resources into the areas of site development that reflect not only our business needs, but also our customer needs. And I think that the online medium really forces business owners far more than any others to go ahead and really do the rigorous work of gathering data on what that customer experience and need actually is. And this can be a new thing for people first looking at customer experiences online. Customer experience, really broad term. Let's look at it in terms of the very specific steps of a journey that your customer is on, from the moment that they discover you online, whether it's via a brand name search, through an advertisement, through organic content, the behavior they demonstrate on your site that shows that they are actually interested. And maybe as the shopping scent on your site becomes stronger and your customer follows it, how they demonstrate intent that they would actually like to make a purchase, and then what that engagement is like. And the engagement is what we really want. Engagement, I would define here as post-purchase. Do they remain engaged with your online brand? Do they come back for a second purchase? All of this really matters. Here are just a couple of stats to look at. Salesforce ran a survey. 84% of customers say that the experience is as important as its product. And a couple of years ago, Gartner came up with this quote that 80% of brands expect to be competing on the experience. So really breaking that experience down into chunks and understanding at each phase, what are the metrics that I should be looking at to evaluate how successful I am at delivering and optimizing for that customer journey. And at each phase, there are going to be opportunities for increased conversion, lower marketing costs, lower operational costs. So it's not just a touchy-feely kumbaya, the customer experience. It is something that can be broken down with rigor and with measurement. And we'll talk about some of those techniques in the second half of the presentation. So thinking about the beginning of how somebody finds you online brings us to the third best practice, and that's this notion of multi-touch attribution. I should say the third trend that we're looking at. Multi-touch attribution is something that is really gaining momentum in the space. And if you can see that graphic at the bottom, this is what I would say is a fairly linear look at multi-touch attribution, where I accomplished a sale on my site, and I know that display, social, and paid search all played a role in it, and I can allocate credit accordingly. Now, the thing is that many retailers, many online retailers, are still looking primarily at attributing the sale either the first click or the last click attribution. Those have obvious limitations because in this example, what if I gave everything to display? Would I then shortchange my investment in social and paid search? Or conversely, should I give all the credit to paid search when if it was the final measured click, maybe that was just a navigational search on my brand and the goodwill was already built up through the repetition of my message and my value proposition through display and social. So that the first benefit you get when you begin to look at multi-touch attribution is obviously I can allocate my spend more effectively. But what's really interesting is it goes even deeper, because if I really understand where somebody was in their journey and where they were in getting to know my brand and my offer when they use the given channel, I can then begin to develop messaging on that channel that is more suited to where the customer is in their journey. For example, maybe Facebook seems to be where people are discovering links to my content or getting inside views of my company. If they're that early in the chain, I can develop my messaging accordingly. Other channels that are closer to the final conversion, perhaps those should have more transactional messaging or a reminder of what I said earlier. But the point is that once I begin to segment, I can track the key metrics from multiple sources and really begin to look at these as segmented audiences that I can bucket to create personalized marketing campaigns that really speak to where someone is in their journey at that moment. So as we look at this next slide, I would say that when you think about trends in online, sometimes the way that we talk about these trends are really very much like the news cycle. Whereas, the news cycle, whether we're watching world events or discussions of the economy, a lot of the time, especially times when we're not in a global pandemic, news stories and the spotlight the media trains on them tends to come and go, but it doesn't mean that the object of the spotlight has really receded into the background. And so too with mobile. We've been talking about mobile's, dominance or growing dominance for at least 10 years, and yet it continues to really be news. One projection estimates that it will account for nearly 3/4 of all e-commerce by the end of the coming year. It's accounted for about half of global web traffic since the beginning of 2017. From a marketing standpoint, almost 50% of all marketing emails were opened on a mobile device as early as 2018. So it's definitely time to look at your own metrics, especially if you are new to this, and understand when and how much mobile devices are playing a role in your purchase and discovery process, because that will say a lot about what your online experience should be like and some of the tools that you develop to create it. Fifth trend and sixth trend we'll look at, we'll consider this slide a twofer, are two that are more on the bleeding edge for many retailers, and those are chatbots and voice search. More than 66 million Americans now own a smart speaker, which is fairly amazing. And 31% of smart speaker owners have used it to add an item to their cart to look at later, and 22% of them have purchased. And what's interesting is 57% of consumers say that although they find human agents more effective in solving problems, 35%, which is a pretty hefty number, said that they found artificial intelligence chatbots equally effective. Now, for many retailers, this may seem like a reach to go out and begin tuning for voice search and chatbots. And I would say that the green kayak takeaway here is to really start where you are. If you don't have chat right now on your retail site at all, now there's no better time to implement it and to really begin to experiment with proactive chat, proactive human chat. If you're not confident in your site search, now is the time to begin to to tune it with the tools and reporting that you have. If you can already check the box on those two, then maybe by all means, look at these more forward-looking options like the bots and the voice search, because they are in fact gaining momentum. Okay, so trend 7, this is another one of those, what I would call the digital advertising news and trend cycle. Video, something we've been talking about for a while, but really continues to gain momentum. And especially for this audience's category, outdoor retailer, these are info-rich and highly visual products that really benefit from video presentation much of the time. And I think what's really interesting as video matures is that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we all knew we had to be doing something with video, but now we really understand that, just think about that customer journey model again, that a video strategy for retail is going to include social, it's going to include paid online media, it's going to include your presentation on Amazon, it's going to include sort of demand creators or category explainers, as well as product demos. So the takeaway here is to really begin to, in a scientific way, begin to throw something up on the screen, throw some paint against the wall, and see which of these is the sweet spot or sweet spots for your company. Maybe social video is far more important for you in terms of raising category awareness than it is for product demo. Maybe it's the converse. The only way you can find out is to begin to test and try. And again, using that journey, that customer journey orientation, and understanding which type of video at which time on which platform is a great way to get close to that and begin to measure some success. The 8th best practice, or rather, I keep saying best practice, I apologize. We're in the trend section. The 8th e-commerce trend that is definitely picking up momentum and buzz is headless e-commerce. And, you know, perhaps for folks who are just now looking at, wow, I really need to pivot and place emphasis on my online business, headless, again, may seem like a reach, but it is something you're going to hear about. And if you are re-platforming, it is something that is going to come across your screen or your desk. So in brief, what is going on with headless is that it really lets you separate your front-end experience on your website and other channels from your back-end e-commerce engine. And what drives it is this notion that someone is going to be experiencing your brand and wanting to transact with you on a variety of devices. This Media Post quote from not too long ago said, by the end of next year, the average person will connect with 13 devices. Maybe. I try and count for myself, and I think, okay, there's my iOS devices, there's my laptop, there's my smart TV, there's my car, there's a kiosk maybe at the airport. I have a hard time getting to 13, or maybe my Apple Watch takes me to 8, but you get the idea. And in the meantime, for many years, e-commerce out-of-the-box packages, and some of the biggest ones and the smallest ones, were really built with a desktop experience in mind. And there had to be compromises and a lot of inefficient re-engineering when we went to another device. The first really big leap was mobile. But now as we get to the Internet of Things, like watches, like kiosks, like your smart car, your smart TV, suddenly we want to have all these different customer journeys that we're optimizing for across all these different devices, but we need a robust and reliable e-commerce engine behind it as the base, regardless of what the customer touch point is. And that's really what headless does. It gives you the facility to have a separate front-end presentation from your back-end e-commerce. And that lets you then experiment with these new front-end experiences without jeopardizing or breaking the back end, or you can work on the back end without breaking the customer experience on your interfaces. So for retailers who sell with a content strategy across multiple touch points, I think it's at least evaluating Headless and becoming familiar with it. It's complicated, it's expensive, but for some brands, the long-term return is absolutely there. So the last trend we'll talk about before we pivot to talking about some of the best practices that you can place into action right now is that there's this growing seeding of ground from monolithic, radical website redesign to a culture of continuous website optimization. So let's think about what radical redesign is. Radical redesign is the kind of redesign where you're going away, your IT team and your creative team is underwater from anywhere from 3 to 24 months. These are large monolithic projects. It's often unclear in that type of redesign that goes on for so long. It's easy to lose track of the success metrics. Unfortunately, some of these larger long-term redesigns are often driven by assumptions and opinions as much or more as they're driven by data. A lot of times they are kind of beauty contests with feature wish lists playing a large role. The opinions tend to come from, what is often called the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. There's a mentality that goes into it, says, okay, we're just gonna do this big lift. We're putting all our eggs in this basket of this radical monolithic redesign, and then we're gonna be done. And obviously that's a really high risk approach. And what's been gaining ground, I would say, at least for the last 10 years, but certainly I'm seeing more and more of it from a variety of retailers, clients, network, what have you, over the last 24 months, is creating a culture on your website, on your digital experience of continuous optimization. And a lot of that is driven by a reliance on scientific split testing. You hear about A/B testing and certainly also multivariate testing, where not only do I test multiple versions of an experience on my site, I can measure which elements of the experience contributed to the higher converting experience. So I'm saying conversion a lot. That's typically the goal in a continuous optimization approach to web design, but you also might be measuring not only your e-commerce conversion, you might be measuring the best treatments for an email sign-up page. You might be looking at micro conversions, like which version of the product detail page allows more people to add an item to their cart. You might be able to certainly test different elements on your home page. In this type of approach, you're going in short testing and design cycles. You identify clear success metrics and a hypothesis that then drives the entire design. And this becomes a lot lower risk. And you also don't have to say goodbye to your IT and creative team for 6 months, 24 months at a time. And that type of efficiency ripples because you don't have to drop all your other projects, and you know that what you're putting into the site is going to be measured and tested. Based on experience, I'm a fan. And what you're really trying to do is create a site that is a launch pad for that type of optimization. So I'm not saying there's never a role for a radical redesign, because if the platform and the site is a mess, to use a scientific term, it's going to be very difficult to start using even a free product, great free product like Google Optimize, or some of the premium products like Optimizely, Visual Website Optimizer. All of those are going to depend, and your design, your test design is going to depend on having a clean playing field. And sometimes a monolithic redesign is the way to clean that up. But then you do want to quickly pivot to a cycle of A/B testing and continuous optimization. So we just talked really quickly about 9 e-commerce trends. We talked about the accelerated digital shift away from bricks and mortar and towards a new relationship between clicks and bricks, curbside pickup being one of the drivers of the big ascension, 18% projection for the year in e-commerce sale. We talked about the value of rigorously breaking down and measuring your customer's online journey towards purchase. We talked about multi-touch attribution, understanding which sources to give credit for your online sales, and understanding which sources play a role in which part of the journey and how you can personalize your campaigns. We talked about mobile's increasing momentum and the importance of understanding mobile's role on your site and conversion process. We talked about what's coming down the pike in terms of voice search and chatbots, and making sure that's a wake-up call to at least tune your regular site search, your existing site search, as well as your existing chat experience on your site. We talked about figuring out which type of video makes the most sense for your brand, rather than taking this wholesale view of we need video. And we talked about headless e-commerce, something to think about if you are in fact replatforming. And we talked about pivoting from this notion of monolithic redesign towards optimization, towards continuous optimization. So what we're going to do now is launch into some of the best practices that can really help you as you are managing your business day to day right now in this moment. And because we're pivoting towards the best practice part of the presentation, now there will be a ubiquitous, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. There will be a ubiquitous green kayak on every slide. So let's go ahead and take a look. One of the best things I've heard in the last month or so was this quote from the Chief Innovation Evangelist at Google. He's also a Stanford B School professor. We really do need to be listening more than usual right now, given the disruption that is going on in our space. And the reason that I would say is to start with that listening and start with that empathy is one of the best definitions of marketing that I ever heard, is that marketing is about understanding your customers really, really well, understanding their needs and the problems that they are seeking to solve, and then bringing them solutions. And right now, as retailers, our empathy is as important as our strategy, because our customers' needs are changing right now because of the current state of the world. And, you know, first rule of communication, how well do you know your audience? We don't want to be out there with tone deaf buy now messages. We really want to be offering empathetic solutions, where then the natural result is that a business transaction takes place or a customer relationship starts. You know, perhaps it's just going to be communication and tuning in to your brand's message and the cultivation of a relationship that's going to result in that conversion. And the only thing I would add here is that when we think about empathy for our customers, I think it's really important for all of us to extend that definition of customer to include the internal customer too, to include our team members and our colleagues as we decide on our retail policies. And that empathy, I believe, is foundational right now. So thinking about that ability to listen to our customers, that is again, it's a heartfelt saying, but it's not only a heartfelt expression. It's something that you can measure. Here's a graphic from Avinash Kaushik. Many of you are probably familiar with Google's website analytics evangelist and I would say the undisputed leader in that field. And look at all these layers that go into a successful website analytics program. You know, as retailers, I think that we tend to be pretty strong on measuring outcomes. We all know whether someone purchased or not. We're okay on measuring clickstream. You know, Google Analytics is free. Many retailers are also using Adobe's premium product or Google's premium product. We know who clicked and where they went. But if you only have that conversion outcome and the clickstream, you're getting the what, but you are not getting the why. And it's really getting to that why. You need to understand that why to get to root causes and make meaningful changes to your site. So this is a good time to be asking yourself how strong your Voice of Customer Analytics program is. You know, are you paying close attention to resources like site search reports, exit and post-purchase surveys, the commentary from customer-facing teams like customer service and sales? Is that in a digestible digest? And are you then able to act on all those voice of customer inputs? That's something that can really make a difference in your analytics program and take it from the level of reports that sometimes just sit there and then become actionable, understanding that foundational why. Another best practice that I would recommend as foundational goes back to the earliest days of the web. Web marketing guru Seth Godin said, you know, sometimes I see the web as just a succession of offer pages. And I would say that every commercial web page, and that means every single page on your website, is in fact an offer page. And it exists to convince people to do one of three things. And that's either buy something, give me some information, or click further into my site. And that really needs to be the most prominent item on your page. Somehow the user needs to know what the offer is to be able to take advantage of it. And that's going to force you to declutter your design. Your homepage, for example, I would say the offer on your homepage is really click further into my site. And someone spends an average of 15 seconds on a web page at most. And very quickly, we need to help the person understand, well, what can I do here? Why would I do it here and not somewhere else? Because most of us are selling products that, let's face it, can be bought a click away, if not the exact same one, something a whole lot like it. And what do I do next? So you have 15 seconds to make sure your homepage answers those questions. Well, let's put that in mind as we look at a retail homepage from a leader in another category. So here's Home Depot's category. Here's Home Depot's page, rather. Certainly a category that's seeing a lot of action in the last few months as folks are at home, and those who can afford to are doing a lot of those home projects they'd neglected since probably around 2006. And as you scroll through this page, it's immediately clear what Home Depot sells. Why would you do it here and not somewhere else? Well, as you begin to go down, you can see how the product assortment is really being portrayed in terms of categories that are relevant at the moment, in terms of solutions to problems. You can see that there's an emphasis here on selling with content. There are 2,000 digital workshops to take advantage of. And I would say, though, that one of the most important elements of this page is towards the bottom. And what you have here is that the navigation is reconfigured into a visual repetition of the most popular categories. And if you've ever looked at heat maps for your own site, you know that the area that gets the most action is in fact that search box and your navigation, these two elements of a customer conversation. And Home Depot is smart enough to go ahead and reconfigure visually all those categories that would otherwise be hidden. And so it's very clear how and why I can click further into this site, the purpose of that homepage. So, Home Depot sells 2 million SKUs, maybe you don't. Let's look at an example from a retailer that sells about 1 SKU. What I really like about this crossroad page is they immediately state their value proposition. This is the fun workout you can do anywhere, even at home. And as soon as that value proposition comes up, I have the ability to begin shopping. And that's what I want. So I have a clear selling proposition and a very clear call to action. No wasted space on that page. So how do you get to a clear and compelling, unique selling proposition? Well, you can go through an exercise like the one that's diagrammed on this page. It starts with your target audience. An exercise like this can be very worthwhile in terms of really building out the brand message. I'm sure some of the larger brands listening have taken part in this. Can take anywhere from 3 months, 6 months. I've seen organizations spend a productive year on it. For the sake of this discussion, let's just say it's, do you understand and clearly convey on your website why your audience should buy from you and not from your competitors? And really having that clean, well-designed user experience is really just creating a platform so that selling proposition can engage your customer. If your site is cluttered and confusing, your unique selling proposition is never going to come through. And as you go through the crossroad page, you can see how they're appealing to different types of shoppers. Some who want data, some who want social proof, but that shop call to action never goes away. And they end at the bottom of the page with a very clear anchored selling proposition, again, close to a call to action. So does that mean everyone needs to go to your homepage and see your clearly articulated unique selling proposition? No, but it brings us to best practice number 6, is you really need to start thinking about every page as a mini homepage, in the sense that every page needs to answer those questions. What can I do here? Why would I do it here and not somewhere else? And what do I do next? Now, it's clear that the offer on your product detail page is going to be add to cart. And to the extent that your page answers that question, especially that why would I do it here and not somewhere else, you're likely to get that click. Of course, if your add to cart button is obscured by a bunch of other clutter on the page, which most of us are no longer doing, even what do I do next might not be clear. Let's look at another retailer who does this quite well. One of my alma maters, Crutchfield Corporation. Another category is seeing a nice uptick as people spend more time at home is consumer electronics. But this is a site that if you're looking for noise canceling headphones, as many of us spending more time on Zoom calls are, you can see how clean and well organized this very long page is in fact is. And it's worth paying a close attention to what information is surrounding that add to cart. It's answering the customer's questions. Do you have it? How much is it? When can I get it? Well, it's in stock. You can have it in 2 days. Here's how much it costs. Right near there, here's the reassurance of the people who have reviewed it. As I move down the page, you can see that there's a ton of information personally researched by someone at Crutchfield. If you look at this in another device, you can see that this retailer is sensitive to using a different layout for their product detail page than they do on their desktop. Tabs work well on a desktop. Accordions work better on a mobile site. So what Crutchfield is really doing here is taking a user-centric approach to visual design. None of this is necessarily beautiful, but it is highly functional and easy to use. And if you want a cheat sheet for visual design, think of contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. Contrast, online, high contrast really helps. And I don't only mean literally in terms of visuals. Things that are different from one another on your web page should be really different. There's nothing more confusing when someone is surfing your site as things that are kind of the same. Alignment, everything on the page neatly lines up with something else on the page. Repetition, these are design elements that mean the same thing each time I see them. Proximity, think of that buy box we just looked at with the price and the deliverability and the shipping information all in close proximity. If you follow that acronym, you end up with the fish, carp. If you don't follow these principles of design and you shuffle the letters, you would end up with a different 4-letter word. I'd rather have the carp. And if you look as you scroll through Crutchfield's long page, you can see they're also, as a sidebar on the desktop view, they're highlighting the unique selling proposition, which depends a lot on personality and trained experts. You see that in another retailer here, another category experiencing an uptick is wine. On the wine enthusiast site, they're also putting the face of their brand, the face of their customer-facing team front and center on the website, and they're tying that to their subject matter expertise. Super relevant for the outdoors category as well. And while I was on this site looking at it, I was addressed by proactive chat. And what's going on there is that not only is a face and a name being assigned to the digital sales process, you can also see here for this information-rich category that there is an integration of content in commerce that is really strategic, that Jeff has a headphone buying guide, which links reciprocally from the headphone products on this page. So that's our 8th best practice, is how thoughtfully are you integrating your shopping path with your learning path? Now, again, outdoor retailers really do have information-rich products. And you can see Moosejaw is doing a great job here as I'm shopping for a tent. Here's everything I need to know about the factors of climate and other areas that might influence my decision. And there's also a clean link to product. As I looked across the outdoor retail category, I saw a lot of opportunity for integrating content and commerce, for integrating shopping path and learning path a lot more deliberately. Another example from another category, one of the largest musical instrument marketplaces. On the left, an assortment of electric guitars I can buy. If you see my background of this Zoom call, I have been at this site before, but in the purple box, you see the link to all the buyer's guides. And then on the right side of the page, the buyer's guide in turn links back to product. Something really important to keep in mind as you are providing the information for the own products you sell is integrating those paths. The last best practice I'm going to mention is the value and the irreplaceable nature of testing your site with real users. Right now, your audience is at home. Many of them are quarantining. It's not that hard to set up user testing over Zoom with your customers and prospective customers. And if you look at this graph, without being facetious, you can see that you get 0 insights when you test with 0 users. On the other hand, if you test with as few as 5 users, you identify about 85% of the usability problems with your own website. It's really a question of designing a protocol, saying, here are the tasks that we want users to complete on our site. Here are the things we want to ask about and probe on that journey. And then just getting those customers in there, giving them the site and having them think out loud as they attempt to shop your site. So testing your site with real users. And I would say, don't forget too, we talked about earlier, the value of split testing your site with AB and MVT tools too, and keeping that HIPPO in check. So we talked about those the trends that we looked at a moment ago, and we just added a few best practices to that. I've appreciated you listening very much. And I think we do have time for just a couple of questions. And I'm looking here, and Daniel asked, what was those every page questions that should be answered? Okay, I would say that every page, and there's a couple of variations on this, but I will say it needs to be immediately clear what the heck is going on. So what is this? What can I do here? Next question is, why would I do it here instead of somewhere else? That's your competitor unique selling proposition question. And then the last question would be, what do I do next? Or where do I start? You know, is there a clear path forward? Jim asked how I view podcasts and audio first content playing a role in e-commerce. That's a great question. My answer is going to be anecdotal, and that I am seeing a lot more retailers using video successfully. Now, it could be that a bunch of people are going to raise their hands now and say, say, oh, we've got a great podcast. I personally am seeing more prevalence of podcasts in the B2B space and the higher ed space, and I'm seeing video playing a more dominant role in the retail e-commerce space. But again, others out there may have your mileage may vary answers. Erin asked, what if you sell multiple products or a range of products on your site? I think that if you sell multiple products or a range of products on your site, that navigation and organization become even more important. And go back and think about the Home Depot slide where you're going to have sort of a default organization, like here's the nuts and bolts. These widgets go with these widgets. These wombles go with these wombles. Then you're going to also have, you know, what I would say a collections-oriented orientation. What are the other ways I can organize these products? Are they organized by solution? Are they organized by seasonal promotions? It's another really great opportunity to get direct customer input through some user testing, through some card sorting exercises. Drop me a note and we can talk more about that. I'm not going to say this person's name because of the nature of the question. How do you get the hippo out of the room for decision making or get them to listen more? Okay, so there's a cultural piece to that. Get them to listen more. Give them an alternative to their own opinions. The highest paid person, when there's only opinions, is definitely going to put their foot down. Bring data. Bring succinct distillations. Well, it's great. I hear you expressing your opinion about that the whole site should be green and you know and in 46-point font. We ran 5 customers through it. Here's what they told us. I think that most highest paid people really do respond to customer data. And I would say listen really well and then have the data in your back pocket. If I were building, this is a question from Aton, and I don't know how we're doing on time, but I will try and answer it. If I was building a new e-commerce from site, what would I use for the CMS, the e-commerce software? What are some of the best analytics tools to track multi-touch attribution? Wow, you're asking me to name products there. So why don't you shoot me an email, Aton, and we will talk about that. It looks like you're looking for a CMS. I see you did mention WordPress. That is definitely one that we're seeing more and more on. You've mentioned some e-commerce software packages. I'm experienced with all those. They're all good. The analytics tools to track multi-touch attribution, I would start even with Google Analytics now. You can set, whether you want linear conversion, you can settle on an attribution role. Trying to see what other questions we have. German, I saw your question of 23% of consumers preferring to buy online and pick up in store. Are the majority opting for delivery? I guess so. That would be a question for eMarketer, but I do the math the same way you did. But if 23% prefer online pickup and delivery, that's a real viable option, or if they do curbside until you have delivery in place. I think we're just about out of time, or we may have a few more minutes. In any case, I've appreciated your listening today. If you want, would love to keep in touch, send me an email. I'm easy to find. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. All right, folks, I appreciate you listening today. Thanks again for your time. Look forward to hearing from you and enjoy the rest of your conference. Big thanks to Square for sponsoring this presentation as well. Take care and stay safe.